excited to be here today. So my name is Joumana. I've been a designer for 10 years, working across different industries in the GCC. I click? Okay, cool. So I'm here today to talk about how can you design for the local context, in specific this region, the Arab world.
Yeah. Do you mind holding the mic closer, Joumana?
Like this?
Yes.
Okay. Before we get started, how many Arabic speakers are in the room? Cool. How many of you have been in this region for over 3 years? Awesome. Okay. So let's start with some facts. Did you know that the Arabic language is spoken in 22 countries? As of 2025, you have approximately 422 million speakers that speak Arabic.
Is this yours? No.
Now, that said, each country has its unique dialect, unique traditions, unique customs, and dress code. So it means when you're approaching a certain design, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Now, there are key considerations that you need to have when you're designing. I tried to sum it up to 3, but of course there's a lot more. You need to make sure that you have a clear understanding of the culture. You need to make sure that when you're addressing your audience, you use the same tone of voice and dialect. And most importantly, which kind of ties for the two, you need to make sure that when you're designing, the visual expression you're using resonates with the target audience, and also the layout works for the typeface that you're using. Now, some of you might say, why is this actually important? What happens when you move away from designing for the local context? Well, for a start, Paul dies, pig meat becomes halal, and bags might actually get pregnant. Here are 3 examples of design that went wrong. In example number 1 and 2, the designers did not understand the translation or the Arabic language. And you can see meet Paul is written phonetically in Arabic, then word by word translated into English, which ended up killing Paul. Then we have, in the 3rd example, rather than understanding that the word is actually a noun, they broke it down into 2 separate words and translated it, and that resulted in bags getting pregnant. And for everyone here that is Muslim or has awareness of their religion, it doesn't matter how the pig is slaughtered, pig meat is never going to become halal. Let's go into examples from brands that we actually know. This is a gift card that I received from Amazon a while back. What's fascinating is that this probably went from a brief to design to production to the customer, and no one saw the errors. So what are we looking at? There are 2 major errors here. Arabic as a language, we read from right to left. What they did, they mirrored. So everything is reading from left to right. So you need like a different type of brain to understand what you want. The second thing they did is they added so much character spacing, the words actually broke. And for a brand that is operating in this region, you would think some extra effort would be added. Okay, this is another example from Booking.com. This is what happens when you don't look at society as a whole. Booking.com had to send public apologies for each and every one of their customers. Why? They adopted an LGBTQ ad that was running in Europe, just translated it and published it. They didn't think of the cultural sensitivities and legal restrictions, and they had to kind of, fix the error. Some brands that are doing it right. We have Noon as an example and Gillette. Let's start with Gillette. Gillette, whenever they're targeting the audience here, they understand the different grooming styles of men, and they showcase that. As well, you would never see a topless man shaving his beard. They're always covered up. This is because of the culture. Noon understood the importance of shopping for everyone, but then they moved away from the black, which is not a really good color to kind of associate a day with. It's very negative, it's grim, it's not good luck. And they flipped it and they used their yellow color, which is the bronze. And I think it really sits very well. Now X, that was Twitter, identified a linguistical gap. When I address people in Arabic, it's either in the masculine or feminine form. So in social media, people are always being addressed in a masculine form, which means all of the females are never being targeted. And what Twitter did, they identified this as a gap and they created a toggle that kind of flips the whole language so that if you're a female, you're also being addressed. Adidas did a fascinating job. There were multiple aspects to this campaign. They were trying to highlight the inclusivity when it comes to sports, all of the challenges that women face. And they had this billboard across Dubai. There were other activations, but let's try to analyze this billboard. First of all, the lady that they used, her name is Asma. She was advocating in FIBA for women to wear hijab, and therefore she aligns very well with the campaign itself. The second thing is she's wearing a beautiful dress that shows her feminine side, along with the products of Adidas, where she has her head gown. The I'm Impossible campaign, where they replaced the M with a logo, they did the same thing here, where they replaced it with an S. But the best thing is they did not do direct translation for the slogan. They took the essence of it and they wrote it, which is an error that most brands here do. They often do direct translation, and the slogan really doesn't resonate with the users. This is a recent ad from Apple. Anyone who's Arab in the room will probably understand, maybe people from other cultures as well. What Apple did that was really smart is they were promoting one of their features, and they associated that by a cultural behavior. So for Arabs, usually you have a lot of pressure as a kid to be a high performer in school. You always need to be a doctor or an engineer. Other than that, there's tremendous disappointment. And this is a story of a dad who's sitting with his friends, bragging, taking a picture of his son, telling them like, my son is doing so great. The son comes to him and he tells him like, Dad, I dropped out of university. And background music with disappointment, he looks at his phone and he realizes, oh, he has another son. So he shifts the focus to the second son here. And this is a very smart way where the brand was able to localize their campaign for this region. Now, when we say that it's important for you to understand the culture, it's not just the culture of the Arabs. You need to understand society as a whole. And Coca-Cola understood this. They identified, this is a little bit old, but I think it still works really well. They identified that migrant workers would like to connect with their families. And they created a campaign called Hello Happiness, where you can trade in a call using a bottle cap. Now, this campaign in particular was very sensitive. It had two different kind of responses. Some people liked it, some people didn't. But they were able to identify a need, they fixed a problem, and I think it resonates with anyone who's an expat here. We all want to connect with our families. All right, let's talk about the Arabic typography. For everyone who's not an Arabic speaker, the Arabic type is a very fluid type. There's so much that could be done with it. It's important whenever we're designing to first make sure that the typeface that we're using works for the brand. I see a lot of designers using fonts that are very playful, and it kind of takes away from a seriousness of a brand, like a bank, for example. What you're looking at is exactly the same word. This is Sahra, which means evening or an outing. And this, you can see it's written in two different ways. Let's see more examples. These are a couple of examples of typeface and how it could adapt, just to highlight the flexibility of the type. And hopefully it could open up your mind to more possibilities when you're actually designing. This is the logo of Jazeera, the TV. So this is what the word would be written like if you're just typing it off the computer. And this is the logo, which is the calligraphical form. Cinema Ail are doing tremendous work when it comes to bilingual design as well as localization. You can see how beautiful the typeface that they used in Arabic, and then how it's anchored with English. Same thing for Government of Abu Dhabi. Beautiful calligraphy, a lot of movement, and it's anchored with a simple typeface. This is recent from Saudi Central Bank. This reads Riyal. And then the last example here, this is work done by Tariq Atrisi. These are two logos of museums. And I think you can see the difference in style and how the use of the Arabic type changed the whole look and feel. One is more fluid, the other is more rigid. Now, a lot of us, when we're designing, we have to design bilingual approach. And what I always see is we always start with an English approach that kind of limits us at some point. But then why do we have to take a stand? Why can't we design for both? This is the examples of what Cinema Il has in their website. They balance the menu really well, where they have the Arabic typeface in a light blue, and the translation is not direct translation. It was worked on, so when you actually read it in Arabic, it makes sense. And then they coupled it with English below. They did the same thing in their print. So they separated the Arabic from the English, and then when it comes to the dates, they're able to use very beautiful calligraphy or font in Arabic, and then the English is anchoring all of the design. So whenever you're designing, you don't need to be restricted by the rules that we often follow. You don't need to flip your designs. You can always start with coupling both based on the layout you have, whether it's a campaign, a website, or even a poster. Let's talk about visuals. I've been working in the industry for a while. The mindset of the clients has been shifting, which is great. There's always hesitation around visuals, and I think it's for two reasons. A lot of RFPs, when they're being responded to, it's not often, at least like in my case, because we're building platforms, it's not often where you see there's a dedicated stream to kind of like have bespoke images or photography and so on. On the second hand, the clients are also worried about the public opinion and how things would resonate with them. So they often try to move away from creating their illustrations or using photography that might not sit well with customers. So whenever you're designing, you have to keep a few things in mind. It's not about not pushing your designs. You can push it as far as you want. However, you need to understand the cultural nuances. For example, how women are dressed, they should be covered up to the neck. Skirts need to be below the knees. For the thobe, each region and each country has their own thobe, and it's a massive insult if you kind of put someone with a dress code in Saudi in UAE. It doesn't really work. So it's important to understand the restrictions and design around them. Here are some examples of good cases that I saw in the region. Airlines are kind of pushing the boundaries. They are going more into like cartoonish styles and also illustrations. PF Chang did something really cool where they kind of adapted their card into like blending both cultures together. This is Exotica. This actually reads mother. This is one letter and this is the second. Then we have Snapchat, because they do operate in this region, massive target audience that they always cater for. They also did really beautiful patterns for KSA. And then we have Cadillac, where they brought in 3 illustrators from the region and they did short videos. Now what is cool about that is like each illustrator followed their own style, but if you watch the videos, you can see that the dress code, the behavior, and so on align culturally, and it kind of resonates with the customers. Okay, so let us recap. When you're designing, just make sure that you have a clear understanding of the culture. Don't stereotype. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Understand the different behaviors, sensitivities, and so on. The second one is the tone of voice. There's formal Arabic, but then you have multiple dialects. You have the chance to blend them together. And spending enough time understanding that is always key. The visual expression, whether you're getting photography or you're doing illustrations, push as far as you want the designs. Just make sure you have in mind all of the cultural sensitivities. And then when it comes to layout, understand the Arabic type and what it requires so that your design can accommodate. Now, we'll sum it up with a framework that might help. When you get a brief, it might be targeting global or local, meaning you might have to create a design that is bilingual. It might have to be similar to Expo, you're using multiple languages, or it could be as simple as you're designing for a bakery, which is, in one of the famous streets in Saudi. So how do you balance how far you push your design and how much you invest in making sure it's culturally significant? In case it's global and you need something functional, you can just have a very neutral approach. Just make sure the translation is correct and the dialect resonates well. Images can be very generic, that is fine. But then if you're going to a more local, where you're designing for a local audience and you want it to be more expressive, this is where the emphasis on culture should be very, very heavy. Even getting fonts, there's so many beautiful fonts out there that you can download or doing bespoke. Something like Noon, they want to resonate with their target audience. So for example, they work on the imagery, they work on the communication and so on, but it still adapts to other languages. So try to find a good balance where you make sure that what you're designing will resonate and will adapt perfectly. I'll end this by leaving you with a quote. This is a quote from this region. اللي ما بيعرف الصقر يشوي, he who does not know the falcon grills it. This highlights that when we don't really understand the value of something, we misuse it or waste it. So that is why I would like to ask all of you to immerse yourself in the culture, be as curious as you can be, ask questions, engage your clients, they'll always be happy to help. And I'm really excited to see the designs that you'll be creating. Thank you so much.
We do have a little bit of... No, it's not working. There we go. We do have a little bit of time for Q&A.
Sure.
And I'm sorry, I don't do this often, but I'm going to ask you the first question. Because when I was at Property Finder, we had this challenge. How much local versus global do you do? You've got a brand like a Google or a Facebook that's the same everywhere. But you've got different nuances. Saudi Arabia, very different market. Egypt, very different market. Qatar, UAE, some similarities, right? But how do you balance that global versus local? What's your advice for people out there?
Well, there's two things you can work on in this. Well, the three things that we mentioned, which is make sure that, first of all, the typography reads, because I see a lot of apps where it's so hard to read the Arabic type. Then dialect is key. So if you want to have the whole website very bland, where it's all looking the same, but then you have key banners where the messaging, for example, targeting Egypt, you have the right slogan for that, versus the one for UAE, it's kind of adapted. This is kind of the win for you. In case you don't have a budget to push the boundaries in terms of photography, that is fine, go more generic. If you do, then this is where adaptation happens, similar to how the ads of Amazon or even telecom does it really well, where they kind of use the family and you can see the same picture just taken with different dress codes and so on. So I think this is the best way to go. And again, it depends if you're building a platform or a campaign and so on. The more you need to target the audience, the more you need to invest in it, where you start getting bespoke typography, you hire a photographer to take the pictures, because currently what's online is very generic. So if you build a website and you go to a couple of, I think there's Golf Eye or something where you can download good pictures, at some point they're all going to look the same. There is scarcity in the market for decent pictures. So that's why you need to kind of get creative.
Awesome, thank you. Any questions? We've got time for a few. Sorry, he had his hand up first.
Thank you so much for this session, and thanks for bringing this up. So I have one question regarding this slide of immersing yourself in the culture. What are the best ways you recommend for teams to do in order to understand these nuances about the culture? Especially it's different between Arab countries, we have different languages, especially if you have as well particular target audience that you are targeting. So how can teams understand these nuances of the culture?
I think curiosity is key. So if you're lucky enough and you're able to kind of meet locals, hang out with them, this is always good. If not, I think ads are a really good way to start. So if you start watching advertisements from different parts of the world by the largest brands, then you will be able to see the difference between how Saudi targets their people versus UAE versus Egypt and so on. Online, there's a lot of content out there. There's also a lot of Instagram channels where they're starting to advocate, for example, in UAE, the do's and don'ts and so on. I think Abu Dhabi as well is working a lot on the culture. Soon they're going to have a museum there. So I think be driven by curiosity. There's a lot of sources. And I think it's important with the client that you go with an open mindset and honesty that, okay, this is the baseline of our understanding. Now help us evolve it. And I've never seen clients that kind of shy away from that. No, they're usually super excited to help and they want to contribute.
Nice. And one little thing to add is do the research. Work with your client to understand who is the target audience. Get out there. Go and get the engineers, get the product manager, the designer, meet the people, interview them, ask them questions, and base your design on that, not just planning it from the buy. So the first thing I did, I was saying to someone earlier, a property finder, I don't speak Arabic, but I took an Arabic designer who's a great researcher too, and went to Saudi, went to Egypt, and I was in the room. And I asked him after what happened. Like, my understanding was very different than what really happened, but bring that then back. If you can't send the whole team, take a picture of, this is a very, especially Saudi Arabia, very, very different. I mean, Egypt too. Everywhere is different, but we need to understand these nuances and then make the decision of how much money we have, how much we differentiate our products. You had a question? Sorry, I skipped somebody else, but we'll get.
So just building on the last question before. So my name is Daniel. I'm head of service design for Riyadh here. And I'm a year and a half being working in Saudi Arabia, very different country, where you work. The question I had was really around Saudi Arabia's evolved so quickly. I think over 80% of Saudis are under 35. They've got a new way of thinking. But also you've got some that are very modern, some of that are very conservative. How do you balance that branding over time?
Well, the fact that you're working in service design, which means it gives you a lot of leverage, so you get exposure to a lot of data, which someone maybe is building a website really quickly might not, so that's always a positive. Testing is always key, but I would advise you work for both extremities. So for example, you don't want, there's basic things. If you get the thobe wrong, everyone's gonna get upset. But and then for example, you don't want to have, if you're showcasing a couple, you can, but you don't want them too close to each other, right? Then if you want to target both, just work on extremities. Target the youth with the colors, the illustration style, the typography, maybe how it's talking, and make sure all of the sensitivities that might kind of upset the older generation, you just stay away from, and you kind of resonate with keep the culture like resonating in your design.
Thank you very much. Can you please give an example of an expressive and local brand?
An expressive and local brand.
Yeah.
I had a logo that I removed. It was.
Controversial?
Sorry?
Is it controversial?
No, not at all. It was a brand for. I've been in Saudi for a while now, so that brand was a tea brand. I'll give you the name as soon as I go off stage because it's really hard to pronounce. Basically, it's a local tea brand, and that's all the guy does. He just does tea. And they branded it only in Arabic. There's no English whatsoever, and everyone knows it, even expats. Now, to give you a really good example of a brand that is very, very local, I'm not seeing much in UAE because of the audience. But for example, Cinema Ail is one that is doing a good job where they're balancing both. But to see something that is pure in terms of Arabic, not so much. What I'm seeing now, what's happening in Dubai, in Abu Dhabi, what the government is doing seems to be more localized in terms of museums and so on. But I think because of the diversity of people, they're trying to target everyone. And most of the time, they're not really getting it right.
Thanks.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. Like when I was a property finder, we looked at the time at, I think it was Carrefour, and they had an unbelievable content designer. And I met him later, I interviewed him and the whole team, and we looked at them going, wow, they've localized and created a unique voice and audience. And this guy, Drew's guy, and apparently Drews are the best content designer in Arabic because they get everybody. He said to me, you know what you looked at? It looked amazing to your Western eyes in terms of a design language, a brand. It was rubbish. It's great for a Western audience. It did not land in Dubai. And it's really hard for Western people to wrap their head around it. Because I was thinking at the time, property finder's rubbish. We try, our Arabic was traditional Arabic. We didn't make it local, even though I battled hard for that for years. I failed.
Yeah.
But it's a really tough one. That's why I was keen for you to talk about this, because it's something that it's just really hard when you don't speak Arabic and you're not of the region, you don't do the research to wrap your head around.
Kareem, for example, started off really well, the content-wise, like they did a really good job. And then at this point now, I was checking their social media a while ago, they're not getting it anymore. So that now it's kind of like more generic, not very specific. Most of the time it's like fashion brands that are trying to do that, or like a perfume brand and so on. but you don't see really large brands always getting it right. It's more about adaptization that is working. Like Amazon ads, they're pretty good, the commercials they do.
Awesome. Another huge thank you to Joumana. Sorry.